Welcome to the IAFOR Aging and Gerontology meetings. We want to extend a warm welcome to everyone who is attending today, and we hope that you get something out of this meeting that is useful and valuable to your research careers. This is the 7th aging meeting that IAFOR has sponsored. Dr. Joseph Haldane and myself began this process with the assistance of Dr. Hiroshi Ishida at Tokyo University some time ago because of the observation that there were no routine aging meetings held in Japan, despite the importance of the aging population in Japan, its growth, its vitality, its value to Japanese social life. So AGen was created to address that need. Every year we have visitors from numerous countries who present their work. This is the second year we have had to present remotely. Last year was a bit of an emergency. The COVID pandemic had just begun. Travel to and from Japan was being curtailed, and in fact, travel worldwide was becoming difficult and impossible to achieve. So we adapted. Resilience is part of the theme of this meeting. And last year, it was a bit of a mess. We were learning how to do a remote conference, how to talk to people long distance. This year, we're doing it again with a little more knowledge, a little more understanding, and an excellent program of talks and discussions about the Aging Life course. I hope each and every one of you will gain something useful from the discussions held today. And I encourage you, this is one of the most difficult things about conferences being held remotely, is the lack of interaction between participants. IAFOR is one of the friendliest conferences that I attend each year, regardless of whether it's AGen or the education meetings or any of the various conferences held each year. The opportunity to network, to interact with students, with colleagues, with junior faculty, with established faculty is one of the beauties of IAFOR, and it's one of the things I've sorely missed over the past year as we've retreated to this remote location status of presenting our work. So my request and my advice to everyone is interact. Interact as often as you can with the conference presenters. Try to share information. Try to interact, ask questions. We welcome that. We need that. Reach out to other conference presenters. You have the chat function. You can talk to anyone participating, or you can talk to all of us. If someone presents a research project that you find particularly appealing, reach out to them. Discuss it. Perhaps you can do some collaborative work in the future. This is what IAFOR is about. It is about collaboration. It's about sharing information. It's about being part of a bigger world where research is an ongoing process to benefit everyone. As a gerontologist, my goal is to help elderly people live long and productive lives, to live with their families, to be independent, to be autonomous. But IAFOR reaches out to a number of different segments of the research community. The AGen meeting runs with both the psychology and the ethics meetings, and it's a wonderful opportunity to do team science, to develop cross-disciplinary research, and to learn about fields that you may not have thought of as being interesting or appropriate to your research design. You can gain something from every presentation, yesterday, today, and tomorrow, and I encourage you to participate actively. This meeting today, we will focus on a variety of topics affecting the elderly. Elderly health, elderly exercise, elderly housing, the impacts of COVID, and a variety of other topics that have impacted our elderly population over the past few years. We're emerging from the COVID crisis now, a little bit at a time, and there is hope for the future. And we want you to be part of that future. We want you to be active participants in the research process, and we want you to learn and grow as part of the IAFOR AGen experience. We would like to see you at as many IAFOR conferences as are of interest to you. And we definitely hope to be together as a group next year in Tokyo so we can resume the IAFOR tradition of sitting down after a meeting, having a cup of coffee, talking about issues, talking about the things that struck us as important as we listened, and to grow and develop as researchers. IAFOR's greatest strength is its welcoming nature to both young students and to young faculty. We love to engage as we get older, as our careers wind to a close. We love to see the next generation get the opportunity to build their careers and lead us into the next generation of research. That is IAFOR. AGen is focused on the aging component of that. And aging has evolved over time. When I was a young man just beginning my career, we thought of aging as something that affected only the population age 55, 60 or older. But now we realize that each and every step of your life leads to your life as an older adult, to successful aging or unsuccessful aging. And we're increasingly interested in studying the life course, trying to understand how life events impact the quality of life we have later as aging adults. These are important topics. These are new topics. These are areas where a young researcher can begin to build a career that will add vitality and excitement to the research community we now live in. Anything we can do to help you. We'll be giving a workshop in a couple of minutes on the NACDA program on aging, which has a repository of public use data that anyone in the world can access. I encourage you to contact me, to contact my project manager, Kathryn Lavender, who will also speak, and to contact everyone who excites your interests and wants you to get more involved in the research process. Thank you so much for being part of today's presentation, and we look forward to your questions, your comments, and your presentations. Thank you so much, and we will see you through the day. That's about it for me at the moment. The next thing on our schedule is going to be the workshop presentation, Aging Data, NACDA, and an Open Source Repository. This will be led by myself and by the NACDA Program Manager, or Project Manager, Kathryn Lavender. So, Kathryn, if we could get the PowerPoint up, I think we could begin.
Okay, I'm just sharing the controls with you here.
All right.
Okay, actually, you might have to let me know when you want the slides to advance. Unless you can enable the remote option, because I'm not seeing it.
Okay, not a problem.
Okay.
All right, let's open it up and we'll get started.
So I am screen sharing. Can you see my screen?
I can indeed.
Great.
Okay. Good morning, or good afternoon, or good evening, depending on your time zone. We're presenting from Michigan, so it's about 8:10 in the evening here, and about 9:10 in the morning in Japan. We want to welcome you to the IAFOR Asian meetings on aging and gerontology, AGen. This is the 7th AGen conference we've held in collaboration with IAFOR, and this is our second virtual AGen conference. I'm Dr. James McNally. I've directed NACDA for over 20 years. The co-leader of this workshop is the NACDA project manager, Kathryn Lavender, who will lead the discussion in short order. We hope to see you all in person next year, but at present we're still living in a virtual environment. Today we're going to talk about NACDA and publicly available resources at the NACDA repository. We also want to talk to you about the Open Aging Repository, NACDA OAR, where you too can share your data with the research community. Next slide. We have several topics to discuss as part of today's workshop. We want to talk about the value of secondary data. We want to talk about NACDA as a program. We want to help you find data, and we want to help you understand how to download data from our project and from other projects. We want to talk about our Colectica portal, which is another way to discover data, with an emphasis on across time and longitudinal data. We also want to talk about sharing data and using data. And we want to talk about our open repository, NACDA OAR. We will conclude with a brief discussion of other resources we offer on our website, such as our announcement page and other tools. This presentation has been uploaded to the Deep Blue presentation repository at the University of Michigan, and Kathryn just shared the link in the chat feature. If you want a copy of these slides, you will find it there. When we're finished, you should be able to visit our site and use our resources for your own research. Next slide. NACDA is concerned with the preservation and sharing of secondary data. Primary data is data that you collaborate with directly. You design it, you collect it, you administer it in order to address a specific research topic. If you are interested in fielding a study of your own, then you are a primary data collector. When you, as an investigator, share this information, you are providing a service to the community by allowing others to use your data for new studies. Increasingly, data sharing is becoming a requirement for research funding. Secondary data is collected and processed by another researcher, but it is used by you to address specific research interests or a project you would like to study with existing data rather than to engage in primary data collection. Secondary data represents the reanalysis of an existing study from a new perspective, and it represents one of the most common and valuable forms of data in the research world. Next slide. Why do you want to use secondary data? This is actually a good question, because many of us, particularly early in our career, think mainly about primary data collection. We have an idea in our head and we think we want to go out and get it. This usually turns out to be a huge waste of time, money, and effort, because secondary data is out there and it is useful, and we'll talk about that in a minute. The first reason is efficiency. The collection of primary data, both qualitative and quantitative, is time-consuming and expensive. Good secondary data should come in a format that facilitates research. In other words, you should be able to begin your analysis shortly after you download this data. Speaking to graduate students, as we often do, using secondary data can actually save you a year or more in your thesis development and bring you into a research position in a quicker period of time. Another issue is variety. The quality, the quantity of secondary data have both grown tremendously, and many, if not all, research questions can now be explored using some existing data set. There's also the issue of theory testing. A secondary data set allows you to control testing of research frameworks and theories in a manner that allows for both replication and validation. Both of these issues are becoming increasingly important in the research world. And finally, there's generalizability. The best secondary data takes advantage of well-defined sampling distributions that capture a heterogeneous cross-section of the population of interest. This allows for results to be generalized to a broader population when compared to a community-level study or many qualitative studies, which quite frequently are limited in your ability to say beyond that specific group what the results mean. It also allows for the testing of results emerging from smaller studies on a broader population to see if the original findings are replicable. So if you do a small community study that collects health measures, then you could use the National Health Interview Survey, for example, for comparative purposes and see how your community compares to the nation as a whole. There are an endless array of uses for secondary data. Next slide. One of the central activities of the NACDA program on aging is to build and maintain a data archive that can be shared with researchers across the globe. NACDA has spent 40 years identifying and gathering and organizing data on aging and the aging life course. It is still available to you. It is all available to you and the research community. It will always be available to you. We are part of ICPSR, which represents the largest data repository in the world. In 2019, our work was recognized when we were awarded the National Medal for Museum and Library Services, a fairly high honor. Next slide. Where can I get data? Where do researchers find secondary data? As the number of data collections has grown over time, they have become more and more available, and they come from a dizzying array of suppliers. The internet itself has facilitated the spread of these resources and allowed them to be offered for little and increasingly no cost to the research community. This has greatly facilitated the growth of independent research and has increased our overall knowledge of a variety of subjects. There are a number of places you can go to for data. Federal resources represent one source. Federal websites such as the Census Bureau, the National Center for Health Statistics, CMS, and National Institute of Health in the United States offer access to vast storehouses of data that are largely free to the researcher. Most nations have similar resources. Access may vary depending on legal restrictions on privacy, but in general, federal governments are an excellent source for secondary data. University resources also represent a valuable tool. Most universities maintain private collections of research data they gather from various sources, and it's often maintained at university libraries in a government documents room. Many faculty, departments, and funded research centers at university offer their research data as a public good. Examples in the United States would be the Health and Retirement Study at Michigan or the Family Life Studies maintained by RAND. Finally, data archives such as NACDA, which organize data and specialize in the preservation, enhancement, and distribution of research data, are another example. The nice thing about an organization like NACDA is we invest a lot of time and energy in making data easier for you to use as a researcher. So we like it when you come and use our data. Next slide. NACDA began as a research concept in 1978. We've been around for quite a while. We were initially funded by the Administration on Aging. This funding was assumed by the National Institute on Aging, our federal agency for aging studies in 1984, and they have continued to support our efforts since that day. In the early 1990s, we were quite small. We only had 28 public use data sets that we could share with the research community. Now we have over 13,000 data sets across NACDA and ICPSR that users can get access to. We are on the internet. We are available 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, and you are always welcome to visit us, regardless of where you live, where you go to school, and what your nationality is. Next slide. Who are the users who come to NACDA? Pretty much anyone. We have over 20,000 registered users on an annual basis who have come to NACDA to use our data for some research project or another. Quite often it can be students looking for a thesis topic. It can be an instructor looking for material to use in a classroom situation. ICPSR has developed teaching modules using data from our various studies that can be used in a classroom situation. So that's something worth exploring. We work with researchers who are looking for new opportunities to write papers, to write grants, and to initiate original research. We also work with non-academic professionals, journalists, and other people, policy people, think tanks, and member institutional affiliates. This would include data librarians, funders, etc. NACDA believes in data democracy. We do not vet your research ideas, nor do we actively limit your access to data. We will, however, work with you. We will help you identify data sets that serve your research needs. We will talk about your research ideas. And if you want to share your data, we will happily work on you to achieve that goal as well. Next slide. NACDA data comes in numerous formats: SAS, SPSS, Stata, R, text, and we also have data on a wide array of measures and themes: cognitive abilities, social behaviors, relationships, physical health, intergenerational relationships. The opportunities are almost unmeasurable once you start visiting our website and looking through our collections. The barcode that's on the screen right now, if you scan it with your phone, you'll be able to get basic contact information for NACDA that will get you started. And now I'm going to turn the presentation over to the NACDA project manager, Kathryn Lavender. Thank you, Kathryn.
Thanks, Jim. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Kathryn Lavender. I'm the data project manager for NACDA, the Aging Archive within ICPSR. I handle our data user support requests. I connect with researchers about sharing their data. I work with the ICPSR curation team to help release the data and documentation, and I help with other day-to-day operations and outreach. I'm going to talk about using our website and introduce you to our search functionality, how to download data. I'm going to talk about accessing restricted data a little bit, introduce our Colectica portal, and talk about how you can share data through our site. So if you scan that barcode that was in the previous slide, it takes you to a data resources page, which shows a chart of different longitudinal data collections we have organized by some topics that we've confirmed variables are present for within those collections. From there, you can get anywhere else you need to on our site. Right now, I am on our search holdings page. If you go to the NACDA website, whether or not you scan that barcode, it's nacda-aging.org. You'll see two areas where you can start searching for data. One is in the upper right-hand corner. There's that search bar and an easy box you can access and just start typing in a term and search from there. The other is on the left-hand side of the screen. There's a little search tab, and it contains pre-selected search parameters. So when you go within the search tab to the search holdings page, this page that is on the screen in the slide will pop up, and you can see that it includes some tips about using our search and some most downloaded links, some preset searches for instance, if you want to see all of our restricted data or all of our most recently released data collections. So it's just really nice to check it out and review the information that's there. Searching for data, we have a lot of different ways that you can do this. So you can basically think of us like a data library. And so if you were looking for a book, you could look by title, by topic, by the author, and other identification numbers. The data, the search from our site works in a similar manner. You can search at the variable level by series, by publication, related publication, by principal investigator, by study, within terms or topics, and by access level, such as public or restricted use. So I'm going to start with showing you my favorite way to search for data from our site, and that's at the variable level. I typed in depressed into our search bar and went to the variables tab. You can see it's bolded in blue for the tab that I'm using. And I used depressed instead of depression intentionally because I was thinking about the way respondents might be asked about being depressed as opposed to whether or not they were experiencing a period of depression. This sounds small, but it can be very important to consider these kinds of details when you're searching and the research topic that you have in mind, because the way a question is asked could change quite a bit the consistency of the information that you receive. So data users can search across variables within studies or across series or across topics. And we also have a comparison tool. If you look at the screen right now, I'm using my cursor around the compare tool. And so just a note about how to search, and you'll find this tip on our search holdings page, but I just wanted to say it here. I typed in depressed, but I did not use any quotation marks around it. That's because that's a single word search term. If I were to use a multi-word search term, I would use quotation marks around that. That would be the best way to perform a search from our site for a multi-search term. This variable search that you're seeing here with these 6,411 results for the word depressed, this is powered by the Data Documentation Initiative, DDI. DDI is a social science metadata standard and preservation format, which is both human and machine readable. It was born at ICPSR and has been adopted by other data centers like Dataverse, and we're very proud of it, and it's what makes this variable search work well. So say you're searching for depressed, like I am in this example, and I want to select a couple variables. I would use the little selection boxes to the left of the variable names and then click compare. And what I would see is a stacked search display comparison of those variables. On the next slide, what I'm going to show you is actually just a single view, variable view, which happens when you click on the variable names, which are hyperlinked. So I clicked on one of those, and this particular variable comes from the longitudinal study of generations in California between 1971 and 2005. You can see that this variable name, if all you were to see was the variable name, we would have no idea what this variable was. The name is WB008R8. That tells us nothing, but thank goodness. And with DDI, we have that depressed variable label to explain what that variable is. Now alone, depressed doesn't tell us much. We know that the respondent answered some question or gave some information about being depressed, but also, thankfully, we can see the question text right here in the variable view, and we can see it's across generations 1 through 4 that were asked, and it gives a time frame for what they want the respondents to report on their feelings about during the past few weeks. Did you feel depressed or very unhappy? And you can also see the values, 0 not checked, 1 checked, and 9 response not quotable. So every variable view is set up to look like this, where you can see all of the variable level metadata that we've been able to put effort into adding based on the data and documentation that were provided to us from the original data provider. You'll also see unweighted frequencies. And this is just here to give you an idea of the sample involved in this study, the amount of cases. And then also on the left-hand side of the screen, you can see the variables that come after this variable, which I think is helpful. And of course, that study with that link, the longitudinal study of generations, that acts like a breadcrumb for you to go back to the study page for which this variable belongs. So this is why this is my favorite way to search. I think it really gives great insight into what is really included in the data, in the specific variable for any collection that you might find on our site. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about searching by series. A series is a collection of studies that can be used together because they have the same questions across years, or because the studies have the same pool of respondents, or some other reason that basically tells you they were intended to be used together. The example you see here is the CREL series, Costa Rican Longevity and Healthy Aging. And it focuses on older people living in Costa Rica. And we have a nice description of the series. And there are several studies included in this series. And again, we can search at the variable level across this series. So this functions in a similar manner to what I just showed you from our main search results, but it's within the focus of this specific series. And again, I typed in depressed, and you can see that there are 12 variable results that meet that search term. You can only see 3 of them because of the slide, but I hope you'll go to the site and check out and do your own searches. You can find series pages pretty easily. There is a tab from our general search page to series, or you can just go to the series page and pick from our list of series and just choose one to find out more about it. You can also search across the data-related publications within a series, which can be helpful. I'll talk a little bit more about related publications in the next few slides. Okay, so next I'm going to talk about searching studies. Searching studies, the default view for our search is to land on that studies tab. That's why it's that first tab over there on the left-hand side of the search results. So these study pages represent everything we know about a data collection and form a complete picture of the study, who it involved, how it has been used, and what the data are comprised of. So you can see that a search for depressed from the studies search results produces over 800 results. And I went ahead and I clicked on one of the study search results, the HALSI study, the Health and Aging in Africa. That's the full name for this study. And I wanted to show you an example of one of these study pages. So I clicked on the hyperlink, I go to the study page, and this is where I would go to download the files and learn more about the collection, including the sample, the time frame, key subject terms we use to alert users to what the data represent, and just so much information. You can even see just from this screenshot that this collection has over 900 downloads, and you can click on that usage report link and see more about the general data users for this particular collection. Not too much information. We don't collect too much information from our data users, but it's helpful to know roughly how the data are being used and where it's being used. So again, study pages where you can explore a single study and download the materials. When we dive a little bit more into the study pages, we get to the At a Glance tab. The At a Glance tab is the default expanded view for a study page. I collapsed it here so that you could see all of the fields that you could explore on a single study page. you've got the At a Glance tab, Data and Documentation, Variables, Data Related Publications, and Export Metadata tab. And then in the accordion expandable fields, you've got the project description, the scope, methodology, versions, and analysis information. And I want to point out, because this comes up a lot, this analysis information, I know there's no way anybody could know this just intuitively. That's where you might quickly find out if the data set has weighting information. It's a very common question we get, and I know it's kind of hidden, and I did not design that. So anyway, the At a Glance tab, once you explore this tab and the other tabs on the study pages, you should be able to find out everything you need to know to determine whether or not this is the data set that will meet your research needs. So here we are again, looking at the Variables tab, and this is from the study page. So you can see that at every point you can look into these data sets without even downloading anything. And again, I searched for depressed within this single study, and we can see that there are 3 results from that term in this Halsey study. And it shows that a couple of them are at wave 1 and one of them is at wave 2, which is great to know. This is a longitudinal collection and they asked the same question in the same manner across time. Okay. So I'm navigating now to the Data and Documentation tab from the study page. And the Data and Documentation tab is where you can preview and download documentation before downloading the data. So there's this preview button. If you click on that, it will show you which documents are available to preview, and a pop-up box will open right on in front of the study page. You can also download without registering. The documentation, you can download that without registering prior to downloading data. And I think that this is really important because, just in general, you want to make sure that you're performing effective searches and you're not wasting your time, and that once you do get those data files, they're the ones that you need. So it can be a really great searching throughout the study pages can be a really great way to just get really familiar with our different data that we have available. So there's a couple different ways to download data once you decide that a particular study is going to work for you. One way is on the left-hand side of the study page, and that's the download button. This download button on the left-hand side will allow you to download all of the materials for a collection within a specific format for the data. And as you can see, we have SAS, SPSS, Stata, R, flat ASCII, that's like the raw text data, and delimited data. And this is our standard product suite for any collection. You might find some older collections have less options, and that's just because they were curated many years ago, maybe before R even existed. But at any point, if you're ever on our site and you find a collection that you need a particular format for and you don't see it available for download, you can email us and request it, and we will provide it to you. So, so that left-hand download button, that's all the materials in a specific format, and then you will automatically get the documentation that accompanies those materials in that download. Then we have the download buttons from the data and documentation page. And again, here you can see these different formats, but you also see the individual documentation files listed. So this is really the place you would go to if you want to download just certain files for a study. This becomes really important when a study has more than one data set. We have some studies that have 10 data sets. We've got some studies that have 100 data sets. So knowing where you can pick and choose which data set you want to download can be really helpful. And that's from the Data and Documentation tab. And you'll see that the buttons are listed to the right of the data set names. Once you decide you want to download, you will be prompted to agree to the terms of use. And the terms of use basically state that you only intend to use the data for ethical research purposes, and that you won't redistribute the data that you download. Once you do that, you'll be prompted to log into your My Data account. My Data accounts are just ICPSR's registered account system for data. We collect very little information. It's absolutely free. As Jim said, anyone in the world can sign up, and we never spam you or sell your information. And you can see there's some other tips on this image that describes the benefits to creating a My Data account. It allows you to use our online analysis tool where that's present for certain studies. It allows you to generate certain reports and access your past searches and your deposits. So it's free and it's easy, and it's how you get to our data. Once you do download data, so again, these steps are select the files you want, agree to the terms of use, make sure you're logged into My Data, and then hit download, check your downloads folder. You'll see that it comes in a zipped package, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute. But once you go into the zipped package, excuse me, you'll see that the data are organized into folders, and that you'll get everything that you need to properly work with that study and cite that study. Why does it come in a zipped package? So the data, basically the zipped package meets some internal infrastructure needs that we have, and we need to be able to support both single and multi-data set studies. Remember, I said that the data and documentation tab could be really helpful when you've got multiple data sets in a single study. So our infrastructure just needs to support both, and the zipped packages allow us to do that with data users. There are also metadata reasons. If we allowed data users to download an individual data file and it didn't accompany or it didn't have the terms of use or a code book accompany it, then you might get mixed up on which data file you've downloaded. Whereas when you get the folder with the zip package, it's all kind of included in there and you can easily see what you have. Okay. So since we talked a little bit about downloading data and citing data properly with the materials that come into it, I want to take you back to the data related publications tab from the study pages. You can access data related publications and search across them in a similar manner to how you might search across variables. So this means you can search related publications by topic, by PI, by title, and we have a whole team, ICPSR bibliography and metadata team, who actively seeks out articles and other resources which use the data that we share. And this is really helpful when you want to brainstorm researching an area that's not very developed, so you could know if you were maybe one of the first ones to investigate it, or when you're researching a really popular topic and want to better understand how the data can be used. So the data related publications are where you discover how the data for any study is being used in the research community. So you can search this from our general search page. You can search it within studies across series, and even better, you can be a part of it. So if you've used data that we share through NACDA or ICPSR, whether or not you got it from us, you can send us your related publication, let us know which study you used, and we will add it to our related publications database. And then it will be there for everyone to see. And it will be linked to that study. And so when you get these slides, you can see that if you want to email us your related publication, you can email us at icpsr-nacda@umich.edu, or you can click that hyperlink, which is the ICPSR citation submission form, and that'll take you right to a form that makes it easy and collects all the information we need about that. Okay, so we talked already about searching across variables, about searching across studies and related publications, and now I'm going to talk a little bit about searching across data that are restricted. I had mentioned previously you could search across different access levels, and I just want to point out that almost all of the data available from NACDA are public use, which means they're available for direct download. All you need to do is agree to the terms of use, log in with your My Data account, and you can download those materials. Restricted data are a little different. They have a couple steps to go through that are extra before you can get the data. And this is because the data contain more sensitive information. And sensitive can mean that the data have either a higher risk of re-identification of the respondents, or that the nature of the content of those data have more potential of being harmful to the respondent if they were publicly known, or both. And so we want to make sure that people are agreeing to use these sensitive data with respect to this sensitivity in mind. So when you're searching on our site, you can tell that the data within a study are restricted because there will be a highlighted red text. I have it circled here to alert you to the fact that one or more files in the collection have special restrictions. You can also click on the Access Restricted Data button if it is available. And when you do, a pop-up will open that will lead you to download a restricted data use agreement, which will have the terms that you'll need to follow in order to access that specific collection. There's also some preset searches for just seeing all of our restricted data that we have, and you can look into those. I think that for NACDA-owned collections, we have just under 40 restricted collections, but ICPSR has many more. So the steps for accessing restricted data are that you want to download the agreement, read it, complete the required fields and protocols. Sometimes it's just completing the agreement. Other times it could include getting approval from your institutional review board. Other times it might be providing your CV and the reason that you want to use the data. You'll want to print and sign it, and then scan it and email it to us. Now, we do realize that we're in the middle of a pandemic, and while we want scanned original signatures, if you need to submit a digital signature or you have questions, please just email us and let us know. And different collections will have different requirements, so just make sure you read that agreement. We have a short video on our site about the process. If you're looking at these slides, you can click on that hyperlink and it will take you right to that page where you can view that video. So, while we're still talking about data that you can discover and use, I want to talk a little bit about our Colectica portal. If you scan the QR code on the left-hand side of this slide, it will take you directly to our portal. The portal facilitates efficient comparisons of longitudinal data. It's based in DDI, the Data Documentation Initiative, which I talked a little bit about, that metadata and preservation standard. The portal is powered by Colectica software. They're a special team that focuses on a product of DDI lifecycle, and allows the portal to work the way that it does. You can search across the data sets in the portal by variable name, label, question text, or topic, which is, it sounds very similar to NACDA with the variable name, the label, the question text search. But what makes it unique is this concept aspect, which I'll show you a little bit in the next couple slides. The other thing that makes it really unique is the ability to download custom variable data sets and documentation. So with NACDA, when you identify a variable that you like, that's a part of a data set within a study, you have to download the whole data file in order to use the variables that you desire for your research from that study. With the portal, you can just pick and choose which variables you want and make your own subset. What you're seeing here in this slide is the homepage in our Colectica portal. It welcomes you and gives you a little bit of information about DDI and NACDA, what the portal does, and prompts you to log in. And you would need to register with this portal in the same way that you register for your MyData account, but the credentials are only the same if you make them that way. They're two completely different systems. So we encourage you to make unique login credentials just for security purposes. Okay, so what really is the Colectica portal? What we've done with the help of the DDI expert at ICPSR and the Colectica team is we've looked across select studies and identified variables that have the same or similar question formats and values. And after identifying those commonalities, we map them to each other within the framework that the Colectica team devised in order to show comparable variables side by side across time. So we took this work a step further and compared those select studies to each other as well. So right now, you're seeing the Explore page within the portal, within the National Social Life, Health, and Aging Project, NSHAP, Waves 1 through 3. And you can see that I've selected the concept of children and grandchildren. So respondents were asked about how many children and grandchildren they have. And what you see here is where across these waves, those variables are present, but more importantly, you see where they are not present. And so this is really helpful when you want to do longitudinal analysis and you really need variables across 3 years. And if they're not there across all 3 years, then you need to figure out what your next step is. Okay, another way you can search within the Colectica portal is through the search tab. And as you can see, you can search by topic here. You can, and I search for depressed just the same way that I did in the NACDA study site or the NACDA site. And depressed comes up in either the variable label or the question text. You can narrow it down by selecting whether you just want to see questions or certain conceptual groups using the item type on the left-hand side of the screen. And so it's nice to be able to look across these variables in different ways and see the consistency or lack of consistency. When you click on a conceptual variable, this example shows the education recode. So the concept is education. And across the NSHAP Waves 1 through 3, you can see that they were pretty consistent with how they coded their education values. Less than high school equivalency, some college, bachelor's or more. And it's nice because it gives you these percentages of the unweighted values and gives you even more variable level information. And there's a code comparison and correspondence tree that'll show you how to trace back to the different studies those are a part of. So from the Explore view, what we're seeing now, as I mentioned, we not only mapped across waves within a single study, but compared a couple studies to each other. And in this case, we compared the National Social Life, Health, and Aging Project to the National Health and Aging Trends Study. NSHAP has 3 waves and NHATS has 8 rounds. And you can see I looked again for depressed and I selected using the plus sign, frequency felt depressed. And when I did that, it added 12 items to my basket. So if I wanted to go to the basket page, I could then go in and create my custom data set using the NSHAP variables that I selected, or create a custom documentation using both the NSHAP and the NHATS variables. So for NSHAP, we have the actual data in the portal, and for NHATS, we only have the variable level metadata. And so you can only get documentation for that. Both of these studies, you're only seeing the publicly available data within the portal. So there are no restricted data in our Colectica portal. Okay, so now that we've talked about now that we've talked about exploring data that's available to you on our site, I want to talk about sharing data using NACDA. So there's a couple different ways to share data through NACDA, and you can access this page from the Deposit tab, the Deposit Data tab. And what you see is Deposit to NACDA, which is our curated archive that we've maintained for over 35 years. And on the other side is our NACDA OAR, the Open Aging Repository, which is our self-publishing repository. It's fairly new, it's a couple years old, and we're very proud of it. It is a part of Open ICPSR, so it functions in a similar way to that if you've ever looked at Open ICPSR. And so also from this page, you can see some tips for preparing your deposit, which will help you whichever way you plan to go. We have some data sharing best practices that you should check out. And we also have a depositor checklist that may assist you when you're planning, to do data management for your research project. So you might wonder, what's the difference between the two options? What do you need to do to give us data for each of these options? And for the most part, they're fairly similar. We still want good quality materials, good quality metadata, data about your data, including the title, the PI description. It's really only with the files that we have differences here. So if you're doing replication data, you want to request permission to give us these files, and we can check in with the data providers and make sure there are no concerns. And then the other area that it differs, again, with respect to replication data, is that for the most part, we think replication syntax is the best way to go. It's following best practices with data sharing for replication data. Your replication syntax should walk another data user step by step through how you got the data and how you manipulated it to get ultimately to the analysis materials that you used. But for both, again, we want complete metadata, we want good documentation, and we want to make sure that we proactively address any questions that any secondary users might have using these materials that you provide. So with the NACDA curated data sharing, what happens after you give us the materials is that we review it to make sure that it meets a certain data quality and to prioritize it. We reach out to the data depositors about any questions we might have to ensure that the materials are complete. We work with the curation team where a data curator then takes over and uses the data and documentation to build a study description, which turns out to be that study page that I showed you previously. They build all that information from the materials that you provide. They enhance the data files, they convert them and quality check them, and then approve the data for distribution on the site and make sure that it's archived for long-term preservation. This can take different amounts of time based on what we get, both in quantity and quality, as well as just the general priorities. And as you can see, the last point is that we are funded by the National Institute on Aging, and so we prioritize NIA-funded research for the curated NACDA archive. For the NACDA Open Aging Repository, you can see that this is the page. Again, it's part of OpenICPSR. We provide some instructions in a hyperlink up here on the right-hand side that you should check out if you're interested in depositing with the NACDA OAR. And the key points to remember about the NACDA OAR, or why you should choose to use that, is that you control the content. We do want you to follow best practices in data sharing, and we provide guidelines and assistance on how to do that. But you can control the versioning, you can quickly get your DOI, you don't have to wait for us to curate it, and your data becomes discoverable through both the ICPSR site and the NACDA site. So a search for depressed, if your study included any kind of depression information, it would pop up just with the rest of the search results. So the last point is that the NACDA Open Aging Repository is great for code sharing and replication data. If you browse what we have in there already, you'll see a couple people sharing their code. So say you've worked on a project with someone and you've merged data and you want to share the syntax so that other people have an easier time merging those data in the future, the NACDA OAR is the place to do that. Okay, so we've talked about searching for data, we've talked about data sharing, and I've basically wrapped up the general functionality of our site. So now I just wanted to touch on a couple resources we created about COVID-19 that you can access. And if you watch the first link, that's a link to a YouTube webinar recording that will inform you about some various resources that we have, but also some of our partners, such as the Understanding America study. So we really encourage you to check out that webinar recording. And while you're there, you might just check out the NACDA playlist in YouTube. We have a lot of different webinars that can be really helpful when you're thinking about using secondary data. The other link in here, the second hyperlink, is a working paper that we wrote with our ICPSR colleagues on best practices for measuring social, behavioral, and economic impact of epidemics. And we wrote this in like March of last year, so right as things were happening, and identified ways that people could look at the data that exists before to measure these social and behavioral and economic impacts, and then compare to later data collected throughout the pandemic or after the pandemic, so that you can see the longitudinal effect of what's been happening in the world. Okay, so wrapping up, if you want to stay connected, Subscribe to our NACDA newsletter. If you go to our homepage, you'll see that subscribe to news button. We send quarterly emails about new data resources, webinars, and more. And just checking out our announcements page or subscribing to this newsletter will keep you in the know about everything that Jim and I have mentioned. If you have questions, contact our user support, which there's a couple different emails, one for ICPSR General and one for NACDA directly. Jim and I both get the emails for this ICPSR-NACDA@umich.edu. So let us know if you're using Deta and you run into any trouble, or if you are interested in researching something. We want to hear from you. Here's a list of other resources where you might find data. These are all hyperlinks. And again, if you get those slides, you should be able to get to all of these great resources. And I'm going to kind of skip through reading through these. So read through them on your own, please. I just want to be mindful of the time. Check us out on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and we have our website and our email. And there's just a brief recap. Use secondary data. It's cost effective and convenient. You can search easily across our site and share data and stay informed, and also try using the Colectica portal. That's another great free resource for reviewing longitudinal data and creating custom data sets. And so thank you everyone for being here today. And we really look forward to your questions. And we hope to see everyone at future conferences in person. And just please reach out to us if you're interested in a research topic and you need help finding data, or if you're already using data and you run into a question, or just anything about data on aging.
Thank you, Kathryn. So hopefully we'll get a couple of questions. I think one of the things we should point out is that the repository isn't just data on the United States. We have data on Asia, China, Japan. We have data resources on the Caribbean and Latin America, Africa, and Europe. And we can also help you identify other data sets, like the SHARE longitudinal study in the European nations. We have a nice data set on Israel that you can look at aging differences between the Palestinian and Israeli Jewish communities. So there's quite a bit of information there. If you don't have any immediate questions, I'll be disappointed, but I will live with that. And but you have our contact information, and it's important not to be shy. We're paid by the federal government to answer those kinds of questions, to support research needs, and to ensure that you can be successful in your research design. And if you have an interesting data set you've collected as part of a project you've worked on, we'd love to help you share it and publicize it and try to make you famous. If you publish anything using our data, certainly let us know. We will also yell to the rooftops that this wonderful accomplishment was done by you. So we'll be here for a couple of minutes, see if anyone has any questions. If you have questions later, I'll be here till about 3 o'clock in the morning, my time. So you can always send me a chat message. Just select my name and I will get back to you. Or you can send Kathryn or myself an email at any time. So do we have any immediate pressing questions that you just can't wait to have answered? This is why we want to get back to in-person conferences, so we can wrangle people and make them ask questions.
Yeah, I think that it's always great too when we see questions from people where they have downloaded a data set and they were really looking for something specific that they saw in another publication and they just can't find it. And I think it's great to reach out to us when you are in that predicament, because we can help you figure out whether it was just never really included in the deposit to us in the first place. And so that'll help you figure out whether we need to contact the researcher, or if it's just kind of difficult to find because of the way that the variable level information was described. And so recently I had an example where someone was looking for cryptokin levels in NSHAP in the blood results. And so cryptokin wasn't anywhere in NSHAP, but C-reactive protein was. And so we can help you find things like that when you're stuck and you're just like, this file is huge and I just can't find it.
Well, we appreciate the thanks from several people. If you're working on a thesis project and you don't know what kind of data you might want, if you're working on a research project or a publication, we're there. We're there every day, 365 days a year. So you're always welcome, and we look forward to speaking with you on the side or through email. And we also have e-visits. So if you'd like to talk about a specific data, we will set up an e-meeting with you so we can talk face to face. With that said, Shoko, I think we can break now and regather at 20 after.
Okay, so sure. We will take the 15 minutes break and then we will start the next panel presentation at 10:20 in Japan time. So see you everyone at the panel session.
Thank you, everyone. And
Thank
we'll
you.
talk to you later. In fact, I'll talk to you several times tonight.